In this part of session 9, we're going to be chatting about kangaroo paws. It's a very unique looking flower and quite a large family. And then in the next section we'll be doing bottle brushes. So kangaroo paws. These are generally unique to the southwest of Western Australia. The red and green species is the WA floral emblem. They generally grow in patches and they almost look like their own little communities. If you've ever seen them growing in the wild, they kind of pop up in these patches and often have lots and lots of flower stems in very small areas. They have the ability to change colour with no apparent reason, so like soil type, biology, genetics, etc. doesn't really seem to have a specific reason why they change colour, which is interesting when you think about it from a doctrine of signatures point of view. And this ability to change dynamically without any kind of impetus. It's interesting. Now this is from the Living Essences, and they do quite a few kangaroo paws, what they believe kangaroo paws are for. Sphere of influence relates to interaction, communication, understanding and appreciation of others. So in communication, it's effective communication where there is no assumptions being made, there's no undercurrents being had, there's just honest, open communication. And this may have a lot to do with growing in clumps in communities. They assist to bring awareness and sensitivity to others, and in situations where one has to interact continuously. So, as I said, lots of living essences in this lot, and one Australian bushflower essence, all by its little lonesome. So just having an overview now of what the essences are for. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. So I'll start with the bushflower essence. This is yellow and green kangaroo paw, and it was actually quite difficult to get one in flower. That's the flower on the end, but it's really the plant itself that is the doctrine of signatures. It holds a lot of doctrine of signatures. It's quite a unique looking flower, and it almost looks like a hand that's reaching out. And the colour is important as well. So think of the colours of red and green. Greenness may be associated with naivety as well as the heart, and red with perhaps a tribal element coming together as a group. But have a think about how you would interpret it. That's more important. Start to think in this language. So, for the bushflower essences, kangaroo paw is unaware of appropriate social behaviour, so it's when there is a naivety to communication, and as a consequence, a sensitivity is lost, and so they may be clumsy in conversation. So they may talk at people, for example, or they may say things, put their foot in it, as the saying goes, say things inappropriate and not realise that they've done it, and not realise that they've upset people. And it's genuinely because of a lack of awareness. So this just brings awareness to communication and a kindness as well, like a sensitivity, tapping into that connection and really appreciating that connection, not being disjointed and separate from another. Next is red and green kangaroo paw, so the same thing, but from the Living Essence range. And this is about the quality of closeness, so the same flower, but it's just told in a slightly different way. I think for me there's similarities here. So negative is is a sense of being distant from another and distracted in communication. And the positive qualities are kindness and sensitivity and being in touch and being patient and being attentive. Basically just being 100% there for another person and not being distant and not, as a consequence, kind of being socially inept and awkward. So there is a similarity here. It's just explained in a different way. The key words here are the quality of closeness. I quite like that. This is all about promoting sensitivity. Black kangaroo paw. What an unusual flower. It's one of the only flowers that is truly black in colour. Unusual to get that in a flower. And think of the doctrine of signatures. When you think of black, think of a black in the human body. You know, we're thinking about perhaps toxicity or where there is death to a tissue, for example. So black in the doctrine of signatures is quite strong in this one because it's quite unique. And it's like there's a toxicity to this communication. So there's resentment, or there's anger, there's negativity, there's hurt. And when you're in that state of pain, anger can bring a lot of pain to people, particularly when you hold on to it. Then your communication is going to be filtered through that pain. And so there's going to be a tendency towards hurtful communication. You know, it's like, I have to deal with this pain, so should you. So black kangaroo paw is coming back to the heart rather than that gut reaction of rah. So this is mindfulness at its peak. This is understanding the sweetness of forgiveness and also the joy of forgiveness. It doesn't seem like joy at the start, and we talked a little bit about forgiveness and the process of it and how difficult it and long this process is, and how it's a very active state. It's a state of love. So to be able to come to a place of love despite the situation, which may be very negative and very oppressive and very hurtful, that's an incredibly strong conscious decision. And that's black kangaroo paw. Not only that, but it's also used physically for kind of toxicity. So it can be used for clearing out toxins. But again, this is about sensitizing people again. And by sensitizing, it means when we move into a state of anger or frustration or upset, there is like a wall, a block that can come up. And this is kind of about melting that wall, melting that resistance to want to communicate openly with another person. And that is kind of the first part of the forgiveness process, consciously choosing to melt the defenses. Cat's paw, a beautiful colored flower, isn't it? Really unique, strong yellow. And if you remember back to the chakras, yellow was a solar plexus, and that's all about understanding how you're separate from the tribe and you're separate from another. It's like, this is who I am, and these are my boundaries, and this is what's okay for me and what's not okay for me, and I'm able to express that in a balanced way. And cat's paw is about that ability to express yourself, to speak your truth, rather than fearing that you'll be judged for speaking out. So what cat's paw can tend to do, and this story can tend to be, is if I suppress my feelings, then I won't be judged, I won't be disliked, I won't be rejected. And so cat's paw, the lesson then of that is the courage to speak out with total clarity and total truth. and to really speak your truth rather than these ideas of white lying, which is, you know, very common in our society, very accepted in our society. This is about expressing your truth, even if that's hurt. If you're able to express, you know, I feel so hurt by what you said, this is what I heard, is that correct? It gives the other person an opportunity to respond, knowing what's happened in the situation, rather than assuming that the other person will simply use that to hurt you further. Isn't this unusual? Purple and red kangaroo paw. Purple, if you remember, was often associated with spirituality, often associated with spiritual love, for example. And yet you've mixed it, it's mixed in with the red, and red was associated with tribalness and the collective. So it's an interesting mix here. In the living essences, it's used for resolving a relationship tendency toward just constant bickering. When people are stuck in a reactive state with each other. So rather than taking a moment, breathing, and coming from a place of, I know that there's no intention behind your actions, but this has hurt me in this way. Rather than, I know that you're trying to hurt me and I'm going to hurt you back as a result. It's a very different space. And it's a reactive space, but it's also a very justifiable space for a lot of people. They can justify why that other person has harmed them and give you lots of incidences where they've hurt them in the past and bring it all up in the heat of an argument. And to release that need to blame the other person for how you feel, to release that need to react when your buttons are pressed, finding ways to come back to sensitivity, vulnerability, love. And even in that space where you feel the most injured and the most hurt by the other person, that's the moment where you can open up the most, where you can, lay back and bare your belly. You can be in a vulnerable space and say, that was really hurtful and this is why I feel hurt, rather than you've hurt me. Different space. And yellow and green kangaroo paw. This is again from the living essences. This is for people, in a way it's similar to rock water and the beach flowers in a certain way, in that these people are hard taskmasters, just like rock water. They tend towards perfectionism and impatience with themselves and others. And they can kind of chastise people and for mistakes that have been made. And there's a fear of making mistakes, a genuine fear. And so this is softening that hard aspect of self. And it's also understanding the incredible value of mistakes and being able to truly respect the learning process, which is all about stumbling and stuffing it up and being able to stand back up in grace and in balance and dust yourself off again and dive straight back into the next lesson with that knowledge, with that wisdom that comes from that. And it can sometimes take a lot to be courageous like that and to want to continuously learn, knowing full well that you're going to be broken and and stuff things up. So, thinking of all of those flowers what are some of the similarities that have come through? When we started this, we talked about increasing sensitivity in communication, and a lot of them were actually about communication. So I would say that a similarity would be the importance of communication, and perhaps that community aspect of the doctrine of signatures shines through here. Similarities as well between the same plant. So Australian bush flower essences and living essences were all about sensitivity, which we talked about. And sensitivity in communication with others, bringing yourself back to a space of total loving presence for another person. And we talked about that being an incredibly healing space, an incredible gift to give another person. The differences may be the yellow and green kangaroo paw from the living essences isn't more about tolerance for mistakes. It's still about communication with others, because if you remember, they have a tendency to chastise other people for making mistakes. So it's still about communication. But a lot of the other ones are applied in some ways to the relationship level, though not always. Yellow and green kangaroo paw is a lot about relationship to self. And if you really think about the beauty of relationships and the lessons that happen in relationships, a lot of it is dealing with your own stuff. A lot of it is somebody who's a perfect mirror, who presses all of your buttons quite nicely, who enables you to understand deeper and deeper aspects of your relationship to yourself, and how much true love flows. And so in that way, really, perhaps it's not a difference at all. It would be interesting to know how you view the kangaroo paws and what you think of this. Each of the different colours, obviously the shape of all the kangaroo paws is quite similar. They've got a very unique look to them. But the different colours have very different flavours that they give to the plants. And so you can see how colour is interpreted with the doctrine of signatures here. And have a look back as you go back relearning these, perhaps how the colour is interpreted, how it relates to what you're seeing. And there's just one example there of yellow, because there was quite a lot of yellow in this session, of brightness and positivity. But really you can look at all of the colours as you go through. And we'll do that with the next session on bottle brush.